She had never known a day of hardship in her life. That much was obvious to anyone who observed Sierra Vance for even a moment. From the designer clothes that never repeated twice in a month to the casual, dismissive flick of her wrist when she handed her black American Express card to a cashier, Sierra moved through the world as if it were a stage built entirely for her. She was a junior at Crestwood Academy, an elite private school nestled in the hills overlooking the Pacific Ocean, where the tuition cost more than most people's houses, and the parking lot looked like a luxury car dealership. Her father, Frank Vance, was a different kind of wealthy. He hadn't inherited a dime. He had earned every penny through Vance Security Solutions, a private firm he started after leaving the military. And the company specialized in high-threat logistics and protective services, and its success was built on Frank's reputation for discipline, integrity, and an almost obsessive attention to detail. He was a man of few words, with a posture that was eternally rigid and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He had a quiet intensity that made people instinctively straighten up when he entered a room. While he provided Sierra with every material comfort, he also tried to instill in her the values that had guided his life: respect, hard work, and humility. But somewhere between the private school gates and the back of her chauffeured SUV, those lessons had been lost. To Sierra, her father was just a strict, old-fashioned man who didn't understand the modern world. She saw his rules as archaic and his expectations as unreasonable. She lived in a bubble of privilege at Crestwood, where status was everything. The other students came from old money and powerful families, but Sierra's wealth was new, flashy, and therefore, in the eyes of the elite social circle, she desperately wanted to crack, slightly gauche. To compensate, she leaned in. Hard. She became louder, more demanding, more overtly materialistic than anyone else. She bought designer bags as if they were going out of style and loudly critiqued the fashion choices of others, hoping to build herself up by tearing them down. She treated the school staff with open disdain, snapping at janitors who got in her way and leaving messes for the custodians to clean, believing that their role in life was simply to serve people like her. Her attitude reached its peak during the spring semester. It started with small acts of entitlement, demanding extensions on assignments that she had weeks to complete, arguing with teachers about grades she felt were beneath her, and monopolizing classroom discussions with opinions she presented as facts. Then, it escalated. She began to organize social events, excluding students she deemed unworthy of her new, carefully curated inner circle. There were rumors of her mocking a scholarship student's second-hand blazer within earshot of a whole cafeteria. The final straw came during a school assembly. The administration was introducing a new charity initiative to raise funds for underprivileged children in the city. While the headmaster spoke, Sierra was seated in the front row, scrolling through her phone, the screen's glow a beacon of disrespect. When a student representative gave an emotional speech about the importance of community, Sierra let out a loud, theatrical yawn and whispered something to a friend, causing a ripple of stifled giggles. The headmaster, Dr. Armitage, was furious. The teachers were demoralized. The students who were the targets of Sierra's cruelty felt helpless. Complaints to the guidance counselor had yielded nothing but gentle talks that Sierra brushed off. Her mother, a socialite more concerned with her own luncheons and charities than with her daughter's behavior, dismissed it as a phase. But the school was at its wits' end. They felt they had no leverage. Sierra's family were major donors. The new science wing had a plaque with Frank Vance's name on it. How could they possibly discipline the daughter of the man who helped fund their new classrooms? So finally, Dr. Armitage decided he had to do something. The morale of the school was at stake. In a carefully worded email, he requested a meeting with Mr. and Mrs. Vance, skirting the issue of Sierra's behavior but stressing the need to discuss her integration into the school's community ethos. He expected a visit from the mother, perhaps, or a tense phone call from a lawyer. Instead, 2 days later, a large, black, unmarked SUV pulled into the faculty parking lot. Frank Vance stepped out alone. He was not what Dr. Armitage had expected. He wasn't wearing a power suit or accompanied by an entourage. He was dressed in simple khakis and a polo shirt, but he carried an aura of authority that filled the entire administrative office. When they shook hands, Dr. Armitage felt like he was grasping a block of granite. But Frank listened in complete silence as the headmaster, trying to be diplomatic, detailed the complaints, the disrespect, the entitlement, the public humiliation of other students. He didn't interrupt, he didn't defend her, and he didn't make excuses. When Dr. Armitage finished, Frank simply nodded, his face unreadable. "Thank you for your honesty," was all he said. Then he left. That afternoon, Sierra was pulled out of her fifth-period art history class. She was annoyed, assuming her father had come to smooth things over, to use his money or his influence to quiet the whispers that had been circulating about her. She was already planning how to spin this to her friends, to make it seem like she had been summoned for something important. She walked into the administrative office with a practiced air of bored nonchalance. But when she saw her father standing there, his expression was not the indulgent one she expected. It was the look he got before a major business deal, or, as she remembered from her childhood, before a very serious talk. He didn't yell. He didn't even raise his voice. He simply looked at her and said, "Get in the car." The drive home was silent, suffocating. Sierra tried to fill the void with chatter, blaming mean girls and jealous teachers, but her father's only response was a low, "We'll talk at home." When they arrived, he didn't pull into the circular driveway of their sprawling mansion. He drove right past it and continued up the long, winding road that led into the hills behind their property. He stopped the car at a trailhead, a place where he used to take her hiking when she was a little girl, and before the cell phones and the designer clothes and the attitude. He got out, opened her door, and pointed to a large, heavy-duty backpack sitting on the ground. It was military-grade, olive drab, and bulging. "Put it on," he ordered. Confused and now a little scared, Sierra complied. The pack must have weighed 40 pounds. "We're going for a walk," Frank said. And they did. For 2 hours they walked in silence on a grueling uphill trail. Sierra stumbled, sweated, and complained constantly. Her shoulders ached, her feet blistered in her impractical, fashionable sneakers. Her father said nothing, just kept a steady, relentless pace ahead of her. When she finally collapsed on a boulder, tears of frustration and exhaustion streaming down her face, he finally spoke. "That pack you're carrying," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Well, that's not rocks. It's food, water, and a first aid kit. It's what you need to survive." He paused, looking out over the canyon. "I've carried packs twice that weight in places you can't imagine. I've carried men who couldn't walk anymore. You know what got me through? Discipline, respect for the mission, and knowing that my actions affected everyone in my squad. Every choice I made, good or bad, impacted the lives of the men to my left and my right." He turned to face her, and for the first time, Sierra saw not just disappointment in his eyes, but a deep, profound sadness. "At your school, you are in a squad. You don't get to choose your squad. The janitor is in your squad. The scholarship kid is in your squad. The teacher you board is in your squad. And your behavior, your selfishness, your cruelty, it's compromising the entire mission. You are a liability." That was the end of the conversation. They walked back down in silence. That night, exhausted and confused, Sierra fell into a deep sleep, the weight of the pack and her father's words echoing in her mind. She woke up the next morning to find her closet door open. It was empty. Every designer dress, every pair of shoes, every handbag was gone. She ran downstairs in a panic. Her father was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of black coffee in his hand, reading the newspaper. He looked up calmly. "Good morning." Your uniform is on the back of the chair. Eat your breakfast. You have 20 minutes. On the chair was a simple pair of jeans, a plain white t-shirt, and a pair of sturdy, practical work boots. "Where are my clothes?" she shrieked. "Donated," Frank said, in turning a page of his paper, "to a women's shelter. They needed them more than you did." The scene that erupted was ugly. Sierra screamed, cried, and threatened. She called her mother, who was mysteriously unreachable. She threatened to run away. Frank just waited. When her tantrum was over, he pointed to her breakfast. "Eat," he said. "You're going to be late for work." This was a new twist. Work? Her work was school. But the SUV didn't head towards Crestwood's manicured campus. It drove into a part of the city Sierra had only ever seen from a tinted car window. They pulled up to a large, bustling warehouse. A sign read, "City Hope Food Bank." Her father got out, walked around, and opened her door. "This is your new school for a while," he said. "You'll be here from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. You'll sort donations, unpack boxes, and clean the floors. You'll do what you're told, and you'll be respectful. I will be checking in." He left her there. No money, no phone. He had taken that too. No designer armor. Just a scared, angry girl in cheap jeans, standing in a dusty warehouse. The first day was a nightmare. The work was physically exhausting. Her hands, used only for texting and turning pages, were raw from cardboard. The other volunteers, a mix of retired people, college students, and people from the neighborhood, looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and annoyance. They could smell the privilege on her, even in the plain clothes. When she tried to use her old tactics, a dismissive tone, an attitude of superiority, it backfired spectacularly. A grizzled old veteran named Earl, who had been volunteering there for years, just laughed in her face. "Oh, princess," he said, shoving a stack of dented canned goods towards her. "Your title don't mean nothing here. These cans don't care who your daddy is. Sort 'em or go home." For the first few days, Sierra was sullen and silent. She worked robotically, counting the minutes until 5 o'clock when a car service would pick her up and take her home, where she would collapse into bed, too tired to even think. But then, something began to shift. It started with small interactions. An elderly woman, there to pick up a box for her family, smiled at her and said, "Thank you, sweetheart. You're a blessing." Sierra was stunned. No one had ever thanked her for anything. At school, her actions were either expected or met with envy. Here, a simple, genuine thank you from a stranger who had nothing felt different. When she started to watch the other volunteers, she saw the patience of a college student as he helped a non-English-speaking family navigate the system. She saw the quiet dignity of a single mother who volunteered on her day off because, as she told Sierra, "I know what it's like to need help, and I want to be the help for someone else." She saw Earl, gruff and demanding, but who always made sure the kids got the best apples and that the elderly got their boxes carried to their cars. The world outside her bubble was not a stage for her. It was a place where people struggled, helped each other, and found purpose in service. The concept was utterly foreign, and yet deeply compelling. After 2 weeks, Frank visited. He didn't pull her aside for a big talk. He just showed up in work clothes and started working alongside her, assorting cans in silence. For hours, they worked side by side. Finally, as they were breaking down boxes, he asked, "What do you see here?" Sierra, for the first time, didn't have a sarcastic or defensive answer ready. She thought about it. "I see people who are tired," she said slowly. "But they keep going. They help each other. They don't have to be here, but they are." Frank just nodded. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't need to. After a month, a new directive came. Her after hours were now to be spent at the community center next to the food bank, tutoring kids in reading. This was even harder. These weren't her polished Crestwood peers. These were kids who looked at her with suspicion, kids who had tough exteriors and short attention spans. They didn't care about her clothes or her stories. They cared about one thing. Could she help them? And for the first time in her life, Sierra desperately wanted to be able to do something for someone else. She had to learn patience. She had to learn to explain things in different ways. She had to learn to listen. She found a particular connection with a shy 7-year-old boy named Miguel who was struggling with his letters. He reminded her of the vulnerability she felt on that first day at the food bank. Working with him, seeing his face light up when he finally sounded out a word correctly, gave her a feeling she had never experienced before. It wasn't the fleeting thrill of buying something new or the hollow victory of a social put-down. It was a quiet, deep-seated warmth. It was purpose. Meanwhile, at Crestwood, her absence was the talk of the school. Rumors flew. She was in rehab. She was on a European tour. She had been expelled. Her former friends quickly found new people to cluster around, and the students she had mocked felt a sense of grim satisfaction. No one expected her to return. 5 months later, she did. It was a Tuesday, and there was no fanfare. A simple car, not a luxury SUV, dropped her off. She wore simple, clean clothes. She didn't walk through the front gates with her nose in the air. She walked in quietly, her eyes open, observing. The first person she saw was the janitor, Mr. Gable, mopping the floor in the main hallway. In the past, she would have walked right through his puddle, forcing him to mop again. Today, she stopped, walked around it, and looked at him. "Good morning, Mr. Gable," she said. It was the first time she had ever addressed him by name. The old man looked up, startled, and gave a hesitant nod. Her first class was history, the same teacher she had openly disrespected at the assembly months before. She took her seat in the back, not the front where she used to hold court. When the teacher began the lesson, Sierra didn't whisper or scroll on a phone she no longer carried. She took out a notebook and listened. At lunch, she didn't sit at the popular table. She sat alone at first, but then a girl from her tutoring stories, the one with the second-hand blazer, sat down across from her. They didn't say much, but the simple act of shared space was a statement. The real shock came a few weeks later. Dr. Armitage made an announcement. The school was starting a new community outreach program, partnering with the City Hope Food Bank and its adjacent learning center. He then introduced the student coordinator for the initiative. Sierra Vance stood up and walked to the front of the assembly hall. There was a collective intake of breath. She looked out at the sea of faces, some hostile, some curious, most just stunned. She didn't give a slick, rehearsed speech. She spoke simply, her voice a little shaky but clear. "A year ago," she began, "I was the most entitled, unhappy person in this room. I thought my value was in what I had, not who I was. I was wrong." She talked about the food bank. She talked about Earl. She talked about Miguel, the little boy who couldn't read. She talked about the weight of a 40-pound pack and the even heavier weight of disappointing the one person whose opinion actually mattered. "I'm not here to give a lecture," she concluded. "I'm here to ask for your help. There are kids a 20-minute drive from here who need someone to read to them, to believe in them. If you're interested, sign-up sheets are at the back. And if you think it's beneath you, I understand. I used to think everything was beneath me. I was wrong about that, too." When she sat down, the silence was deafening. Then, a slow, steady clap began from the back of the hall. It was Dr. Armitage. Then, a few teachers joined in. Finally, a smattering of students, including the girl in the second-hand blazer, began to applaud. It wasn't a roaring ovation, but it was real. It was respect, earned the hard way. Frank Vance was not at the assembly. He didn't need to be. He heard about it later that night from Sierra herself, over a simple dinner she had helped cook. He listened, and for the first time in a long time, a genuine smile touched the corners of his weathered face. He didn't say, "I'm proud of you." He didn't need to. He simply reached across the table and gave her hand a single firm squeeze. The Navy SEAL had completed his most important mission. He had brought one of his own back to the squad.